FYI, this is part 2 of this series. Part 1 is all about regretful clothing and accessory purchases. You can go check that out if you'd like. Let's get into it. Number 1, books. Okay, books that I didn't read or didn't finish. There are books that you actually want to read, then there are books that you want to have read. Like most of us are genuinely going to enjoy Harry Potter or Game of Thrones or the Twilight series, whatever you're into. But instead, we try to force down Dostoevsky or Moby Dick just to feel like the kind of person that reads those books or to say that we read them. I'm not saying that no one actually enjoys hardcore philosophy or classic literature or that you should always shy away from difficult material. But I think we can all relate to struggling through a book that, frankly, we don't actually want to read. School is at least partly to blame. I remember, especially in high school, having to read books that I just didn't understand and didn't enjoy. Now that I'm older and have kids of my own, I can see how dumb this approach is. We should try to make kids fall in love with reading, and to do that, you have to read books that you love. Now, I've read hundreds of books, maybe thousands, but I've also accumulated a small graveyard of books that I never finished. You know, I'd read the first couple chapters and then lose interest or realize that it wasn't for me. Or in the case of a lot of nonfiction, I feel like I got the gist of it after the first few chapters and I didn't really need to finish it. Now, I used to try to power through and finish every single book that I started. Nowadays, I just put them down and move on to something else. I'll even read the same books over and over again, especially fiction. My point is, don't buy books just because they're popular or they seem intelligent. Buy books that you actually want to read, that you're going to enjoy the process of reading, regardless of reading level or genre. Number 3, cheap camera gear. I'm not saying you should spend a bunch of money on fancy camera equipment if you're just getting into like content creation or photography. I mean, if you're just testing the waters on YouTube, I would just use your phone for now. But if you are committed to one of these hobbies, or if, like me, you do this for work, it usually makes sense to spend a little more money on the gear that you actually want. This is the gear that will also have you covered for the future. I think this is especially true for lenses and mics. Like when I got my first real camera, the Panasonic GH5, which I still use, it came with a kit lens, which was a zoom lens with a variable aperture. So that meant that when you zoomed in, you would lose that nice bokeh effect, that blurry background. I eventually upgraded to the better version of this lens, this one here, which costs about twice as much. It's also a zoom lens, but with a fixed aperture, so you can zoom all the way in and you still keep that nice soft bokeh. Twice as expensive, but so much better. Same goes for mics. I finally ponied up for the SM7B after years of using a cheap lav mic, and it's just so much better, especially in an untreated room with a bit of background noise. This is also true for lighting. Like I used to just use a pair of cheap Amazon lights that were like really harsh and hard to control, and then I finally invested in better brands like Amaran, and the difference is night and day. Or should I say light and day. Worth every extra penny. I think camera gear, especially if you use it for work or if you have a serious hobby, is absolutely a buy once, cry once category. Number 4. Not enough storage. You know when you're buying a new laptop and you're doing that configuration thing online? You start ramping up the specs, a little bit of RAM over here, a little storage over there. All of a sudden you're looking at a $3,000 machine. Apple users know what I mean. So you try to decide what to compromise on. It's like, well, 1 terabyte wasn't quite enough last time, so I guess I'll get 2 this time. And then 6 months later, my Mac is telling me that I'm almost out of disk space, always when I'm just trying to finish up editing and exporting a YouTube video. Turns out I should have gotten 4 terabytes of space. And yes, I know you can use an external hard drive. I have one, but I don't always have it with me. And honestly, I'd rather just pay the extra money to never have to worry about it. Same goes with SD cards. As a video maker, it's so frustrating to run out of SD card storage space right when you're filming. I always kick myself for not just spending a little bit more on the bigger card. So my next SD card purchase will be much larger, and my next laptop will be fully spec'd out. 5. Neck pillows and other travel gimmicks. I was flying back from Ireland after a wedding and I was very tired in the Dublin airport. And by tired, I mean hungover. And by hungover, I mean still drunk. And I went to one of those airport accessory shops and I spent way too much on one of those U-shaped neck pillows. I was just desperate to get some sleep on the plane. It didn't work at all. And I knew it wasn't going to work. I had already tried these pillows. They've never worked for me. I ended up giving it away. It was a total waste of money. Is it just me, or are these gimmicks? Like, do these actually work for anybody? Let me know in the comments. Number 6, cheap plane tickets. Speaking of travel gimmicks, it's hard not to try to be thrifty when you're buying plane tickets. Like if you can save $150 by going with Spirit Airlines instead of Delta, maybe you should. How bad can it be? Well, if you do this, you will be living in regret. I've actually only flown Spirit Airlines once, and I remember I thought my seat was broken because it wouldn't recline. This was an LA to DC flight, so it was like 5 or 6 hours, and I was like, this is gonna get uncomfortable real fast. So I flagged down the flight attendant and I asked if something was wrong. He explained that the seat was pre-reclined. In other words, it just doesn't adjust. Charging for water, I get it. The tickets are super cheap. But seats that don't recline on cross-country flights, that's a deal breaker for me, and I've never flown Spirit again. I think it's almost always worth it to pay a bit more for comfort, especially on long trips or in situations where you have to be somewhat well-rested upon arrival. 7. Steakhouse dinners. A really good steak is delicious. Not something I'd eat all the time, not even every week, but still tasty and filling. A bad steak is inedible, and an average steak is just average. I've been to a few high-end steakhouses, usually at someone else's choosing. You know, Ruth's Chris, Morton's, a handful of indie joints that are even higher end than the more well-attended chains. The kind of place where you can't get any cut of beef, not even like a petite filet for less than $40-50. They never come with any sides, so you have to pay $16 for some potatoes or spinach. And honestly, more often than not, I'm underwhelmed by the actual steak. I always try to hide my disappointment as I sip my $18 Manhattan and look around the table wondering if my fellow diners are actually enjoying their overpriced meals more than I am. Like, is there something wrong with me? Are we all just pretending to like this overpriced meat? 9 times out of 10, I feel like I can get a steak that tastes just as good or maybe better by making it at home, and it'll be half the price. I don't know, maybe I'm weird. Am I the only one that feels this way? Let me know down in the comments. Number 8, my first condo. Well, my only condo, which was my first real estate purchase. I was in my early 30s, living just outside DC, working downtown, and I decided that I wanted to live in the city. I had an irrational urge to buy instead of rent. It just seemed like the thing to do at that age for some reason. In hindsight, I should have just kept renting for a while. Condos really aren't the best purchases with their fees and their slow appreciation. The one I bought was in a nice blue chip neighborhood, which is great. It wasn't going to lose value, but it also wasn't really going to gain much value. It was in a great location, but the actual unit wasn't anything special. Ground floor in a very old building. It looked better on paper. You know, it came with a parking spot, walking distance to Metro, but the unit didn't have the best natural light. The old building lacked central AC. The old windows were charming, but not the most functional. When I moved out west with my then girlfriend, now wife, I decided to keep the condo and rent it out. I've had a few different tenants, one of which was a total pain, and every year something annoying happens, like the tenant doesn't want to renew their lease or an appliance needs to be replaced. Since I don't live in DC anymore, I had to get a property manager, and that eats into the already meager profits. I really don't recommend buying and owning rental properties unless you just happen to enjoy being a landlord and property manager. For me, the whole thing was a valuable learning experience, but I would not do it again. I probably would have just kept renting apartments until I was ready to buy a longer-term single-family home. Number 9, small beds. Anytime I've bought a full-size bed, I regretted it. They're great for one person, but they're just not big enough for 2, and I always end up upgrading to a queen or a king. See, by default, I tend to go small. You know, a compact phone, a smaller vehicle, a full-size bed frame. And sometimes your space does limit your options. The truth is, all of my full-size mattresses have eventually been replaced, so it would have made sense to just go bigger from the start. On the flip side, I have never regretted buying a larger bed. Like now, we have a king-size bed in our bedroom, and it's awesome. It's great if you share a bed and you run hot, or if your bedmate is a light sleeper. It's great for kids because it basically doubles as a trampoline. Whenever we travel somewhere, my wife and I have to share a full-size bed or even a queen, it just feels a bit snug. I guess I'm spoiled, but I think this is one category where bigger is better. 10. Supplements. I know that the vast majority of supplements don't work and that the industry is mostly a big scam, but I used to get sucked into the hype every now and then and waste my money on these magic pills. Specifically, I remember being very intrigued by the category of nootropics. These are the so-called limitless pills that will enhance cognition and maximize energy levels without any negative side effects. This was during the mid-2010s era where life hacking was in vogue. There was a small corner of the internet that was obsessed with biohacking and self-optimization. I bought a couple of the more popular supplements, which of course did nothing. I've also bought my fair share of protein and creatine. These do work, of course, and they make sense in certain circumstances, but for my goals and fitness routines, they never really made sense. Like most people who buy supplements, I was just looking for shortcuts, and true shortcuts don't exist. I'm older and wiser now, and I no longer waste my money on supplements. I simply put that money towards food. That's my list. I'd love to hear from you. What's one thing that you regret spending your money on, either recently or when you were younger? Thank you as always for watching, and until next time, stay stylish.